All right, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to speak today. I'm really excited about this.
Mm,
I actually, the last time we spoke, you had
mm,
mentioned that you were writing your own story, and I remember I was very enthusiastic about it. So I was
mm,
excited
mm,
to see this one. And
mm,
the first question I want to ask is, I'm hoping it's not too big, but
mm,
as
mm,
I read your story personally.
mm,
It feels like you were meant for the life that you lived. Like it just your circumstances from the
mm,
beginning. I mean, Norman Vincent Peale pops into your story like
mm,
really young, and it just seems to me like you were set on this course. You were meant to be this scholar, this academic, and specifically this esoteric spiritual scholar. But I'm
mm.
curious, as you were writing it, as you're putting it together and reflecting, what was your takeaway? Like, how do you look at your life as one complete, or not complete story, but one long story? How does it
Mm.
appear to you?
Well, uh, I have the feeling that I was guided in some way, although it took some time for me to find the path that I was destined to. But looking back, I feel there were certain signs that I was destined for this particular path. Like I describe in the book how on a school trip to Italy, we visited a gallery in Florence and I saw the famous painting by Botticelli, The Primavera. And I was very struck by this painting. And it's a very pagan painting, actually, because it shows a group of gods and goddesses in a wood. And there was something about this painting that really struck me. Um, so that could have been a sign that I already had a sort of a pagan self in me. And another sign was when I was about 21, when I was a university student. One night I had a very vivid dream where I saw a procession of maenads led by a sort of a pan figure playing a panpipe and dancing through a wood. And in the morning, I painted this picture, and I still have it actually. Actually, I can hold it up.
Oh, actually, yeah, it's in the book. I want to tell everybody
Oh right. Well,
we're discussing yeah the call of the old gods, and there is a picture of this painting in the book. And it's funny you bring it up, Chris, because I was actually going to bring up that I love the painting. I think it's amazing.
ah, well, well, here it is. Um,
Oh wow, that looks even better, full size.
yeah, I hope everyone can see it.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's framed very well right now. The lighting's really good on it.
yeah, good. Well, uh, yes, some people who see it admire it. It doesn't strike me as being technically a very good painting, but it carries an important message.
Hmm.
And so that was another indication that I had somehow a pagan self inside of me. But it wasn't until many years later that I actually discovered paganism as a viable spiritual path. That really happened when I was living in London in the late 1970s, early 80s. And I was living in a part of North London where there was a lot of occult activity going on. There were various groups practicing different forms of. There was one group that was practicing Wicca, another that was practicing a kind of Golden Dawn magic, and that magical group was very near where I lived. So I started celebrating with them, and one of the members of that group was Freya Aiswin, who went on to become a well-known expert on the runes and the Nordic tradition. So I started getting interested in that through her. And around the same time, I became friendly with Hilmar Örn Hilmarsson, who's the head of the pagan community in Iceland, the Asatru community. And I visited Iceland a few times. Then at a certain point, I emigrated to the United States. I was married at that time to an American woman, and but I was still looking for a path. I hadn't yet definitely opted for the pagan path, and well, we moved to New York, where she had an apartment, and it was right next door to a synagogue. And one day I went into this synagogue just out of curiosity, and I found the service very attractive, and started going back there fairly regularly. And at one point, I considered converting to Judaism, but in the end, I didn't, because the marriage fell apart, and I moved back to Europe. Moved initially to England, to London, and then very soon after that to Germany, where I found a job in Hamburg. And one day I was at the Frankfurt Book Fair, and I ran across an old friend from London days, whom I knew from these circles in North London, Frederick Lamond, who had been in the Wicca movement, the neo-witchcraft movement, for most of his life. And he'd written a book called Religion Without Beliefs, which was about his own particular path to the Wicca religion and about paganism in general. And he was looking for a publisher. Well, a couple of years later, he had it published, and I met him again in Prague, and I got a copy of the book from him and read it on the train going back to Hamburg. And by the time I'd finished reading it, I was convinced that the pagan path was the one for me. So I called him on the phone, and I said, "Well, Fred, what should I do now?" And he said, "Well, you could join the Pagan Federation, which is an international pagan organization. Started in India, but started in England, but it has since spread to many other countries." So, so I did that, and my contacts in the Pagan Federation said, "Well, why don't you start what's called a pub moot, a regular meeting in a pub with like-minded people?" So I did that. I started a pub moot in Hamburg, and there was a fairly mixed bag in terms of pagan traditions. There were some who were into sort of vaguely Celtic things, and there were some who were into Wicca, some were into the Nordic tradition, Asatru. And I became more and more attracted to the Nordic tradition, partly because there's a continuity there, because we have the Edda, and the Edda, the collection of Old Norse poems about the gods, and we have the sagas, and so we know a great deal about the old Nordic religion from these sources, and also from customs and traditions that have survived. So I felt that there was a continuity there, and also I felt that that was really the religion of my ancestral roots. It's part of part of my ancestry is Celtic. Partly it's Germanic, because my forebears came partly from the north of Scotland, partly from the north of England, which was colonized, quite heavily colonized by Vikings. So there's quite a lot of Viking blood there. So anyway, that was the path I became attracted to. Yeah, so that's really where I am now.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So there was a mention in your book. You had a friend who was a scholar. Almost all your friends are scholars of some kind. But you had one particular one, and sorry, I don't remember because I didn't actually plan on bringing this up, but it just leapt into my mind. And he had done some work on the fact that the European civilization was much more advanced than people had previously given it credit for. Like you said, it was like during the time of Egypt in the ancient pyramids, you said Europe had been mistaken to have been not really very well civilized, but there's scholarship to suggest that's not correct.
Yes, well, quite quite a lot of people have just discovered evidence for that.
Mm.
When you think of something like Stonehenge, for example, which is even older than the pyramids, and an extraordinary feat of engineering it was to build Stonehenge. Just getting those stones there, because they didn't come from the area. They were brought there from far away. Just bringing them there and erecting them was a huge feat. And Stonehenge, it was built as a kind of solar temple, and the astronomical knowledge and mathematical knowledge involved in it is enormous. And there are other prehistoric sites like the Callanish stones in the Hebrides, in the island of Lewis, which show that the ancient North Europeans were, in fact, they already had a very advanced civilization when the Romans were still living in caves. So,
wow. So yeah, there's a lot to draw from there. But so reading your book, you meet like a who's who of people in the esoteric community. It's astonishing. It's almost like it's almost like truth is stranger than fiction. Like your whole life, you're meeting all these fascinating people, Joscelyn Godwin, like all these major figures. But a little one that popped up is you mentioned that William Burroughs, through the mail, you had gotten him to be part of your writing, the writing club that you put together. Yeah, could you tell that story a little bit? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, well, I became very fascinated by Burroughs as a teenager. Looking back on it, I don't think he was a very healthy influence on me.
I think a lot of us who have been influenced by Burroughs could agree with that assessment.
Yeah, but I remember it was at the Edinburgh Festival. I was brought up in Edinburgh, and there was a bookshop in Edinburgh run by an American called Jim Haynes, and it was a kind of meeting place for the alternative community in Edinburgh. And one evening there was a sort of literary gathering, and a recording was played of Burroughs reading The Naked Lunch, and I was immediately very fascinated by this sort of droning nasal voice that Burroughs had, and the style in which it was written. Because he did have an extraordinary style. It was a kind of stream of consciousness style, and he did have a certain literary flair. Um, so I became very fascinated by his writing, and I started trying to imitate it. I read some stories written in Burroughs' style, and then at Oxford, when I co-founded a society of writers, we a university society had to have a couple of senior members. So I actually wrote to Burroughs, who was living in Tangier, uh, and I got a friendly letter back from him saying he would be happy to be a senior member of the society. So that was my contact with Burroughs.
I love that because he's I mean he has a lot of fans, but he's such a spacey, strange figure. Like for him, that common like Curtis like niceness that he extended by remotely accepting this offer. It's so interesting to me, and it says a
Yes.
lot to me about the complexity of him as a person. But it's also funny to me that you mentioned his voice because to me, Burroughs and Charles Bukowski are two writers where like once you hear their voice you
Mm.
will always hear their writing in their voice because they have
Yes, yeah,
such distinct voices.
that's
Um,
true. Yeah. Mm.
but also, so Colin Wilson, which is that I thought that was like you met him back in kind of his heyday. Could you talk a little bit about your history with Colin Wilson?
Yes. Well, I knew of his work right from the time he became famous with the publication of his book, The Outsider. So I knew who he was. Um, then when I wrote my first book on the Rosicrucians, I thought that he would be a good person to write the foreword. So I wrote to him and said, would he do that? And he agreed. He liked the book, and he wrote a very nice foreword. And then I happened to be in Cornwall on holiday, not far from where he lived, and I went to visit him. He lived at a place called Goran Haven in Cornwall, and he was very friendly and hospitable. I had supper with him and his family, and then I kept up. I became a friend of his and kept up with him at intervals for quite a long time.
Hmm.
Uh, got together with him in New York when he was in New York on a lecture visit, and visited him a couple more times in Cornwall. And he was a very nice person. He was very warm, friendly, not at all pretentious,
Hmm.
and very interesting person to talk to. So he was a much healthier influence on me than Burroughs was.
Yeah. Way back in the day, I remember when I was probably maybe 16 or so.
Mm.
I got my hands on The Outsider by
Oh, mm.
Wilson, and there was something because the book's not overtly spiritual or esoteric or occult. It's more just kind of like literary criticism, really applied to life as a whole. But something about it
Mm.
sparks something in my mind. There was something mystical about it, even though it's
Yeah.
not an overtly mystical book, which is
Mm.
something I find interesting when you look at the career that he went into, you know?
Mm. Well, of course, then he did go on to write things about the occult,
Right, right.
esoteric. Mm.
Yeah, largely because, well, as you said in the book, that period where at first he was the darling of the academic community, and then he had a little bit of a personal event that kind of turned everybody against him, and he kind of like had to go into a more independent
Yeah,
direction.
it was very unfair the way he was treated by the British literary establishment. Uh,
Hmm.
at first, they celebrated him, and he was the sort of the flavor of the day for quite a long time. And then they turned against him it was well, I won't go into the whole story, but it was
Mhm.
there was a sort of scandalous incident that took place at his flat in London, um, which was not his fault, but the media seized on this, um, and used it as a reason to drop him, really.
Mhm.
But nevertheless, he went on to have a very successful career.
Right. Yeah. Thankfully, that would have been like truly tragic if he was completely derailed by those events.
Yeah.
But and so it actually makes me curious. It was a question I was going to ask a little later, but now seems like a good time. So I mean, you're a scholar, like an actual professional scholar, or at least you were.
Mm,
You've also been an editor. You've filled various roles, but you've also been a
mm,
professional scholar. But you actually practice a lot of these things that maybe the
yeah.
mainstream academic community would not be so keen to.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, you kind of rode this the razor's edge,
Mm,
to being
yeah.
a respectable and respected scholar and being
Yeah.
an actual practitioner who did not, you were open about it. You said, yeah, this is what I believe. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious, what was that like in your journey? And do you think your life would have been easier if you had hidden your beliefs a little more and been a little more quiet about it? Like, as you look back, how does that all feel
Mm.
to you?
Yeah. Well, as you say, I'm a bit unusual because I wear two hats. I wear a scholar's hat and a practitioner's hat. Now, in with some people who have a religious path, that's perfectly acceptable to the world of scholarship and academia. If I was, say, a Catholic, or if I were a Buddhist, or a follower of Marxism, shall we say, um, that would be okay in the academy. But being a pagan is looked on as something um, a bit suspicious. So I am a bit unusual in that way. Um, it hasn't affected my career because for most of my life I've not held an academic job. Uh, the nearest, well, I did hold an academic position for a very short time at the University of Exeter in the uh, program there in Western esotericism that was started by Nicholas Goodrick Clark. But apart from that, I've never held an academic position. So my own personal path has not affected my career.
Hmm.
Um, but in fact, the there have been apologists for paganism in within psychology and philosophy for a long time, for several decades, actually. Um, for example, the, um, the psychologist James Hillman, who was actually quite explicitly pagan. If you read, for example, his book, Re-envisioning Psychology, he talks about how paganism is a much better perspective from which to understand the human mind, because the human mind is composed of many people under one roof, as it were. And so a polytheistic way of seeing the human mind is a much better way than a monotheistic way. Um, and there's a lecture by James Hillman. It's posted on the internet, actually, and he's actually quoting Joseph Campbell. He's quoting a remark of Joseph Campbell, um, which was that something to the effect of the gods are not dead, but waiting on the corner of 42nd Street for the lights to change. So,
Hmm.
so
I love that. I love that.
yeah. Well, I've often passed that corner when I lived in New York, but I wasn't looking out for gods at the time.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to look at it, and
Yeah,
it also sparked the memories of Gurdjieff because I remember Gurdjieff
yes,
at a time when it was a little less acceptable. He used to
mm,
talk about how there is no you, there's a whole bunch of yous that
yeah,
are all
right,
competing, and that supposed to
yeah,
use that deputy steward to kind of to bring them all
mm,
together and make sense of it.
mm,
But yeah, that's I really love that about the polytheism being really more mental or more
mm,
useful mental model for people because it does to my understanding of human consciousness, it makes more sense.
yeah,
Um,
mm,
but so yeah, you talk about it just came up a little bit in what you were talking about here, but in your book you write about how when you were young, there were no real options. You were either the mainstream Christian denomination that was in your area, or you said Buddhism was kind of something you could maybe find. You could, if you wanted to explore another religion, you might be able to explore
mm,
Buddhism. But could you just expand on that a little bit? Because I think it's
mm.
hard, especially younger people today, to understand what it was like to be so isolated like that and to not have options. Could you just
Yeah,
talk about what
yeah,
that period was like growing up, just culturally?
yeah, yeah. Well, as you say, if if you were looking for an alternative spiritual path, there just weren't that many choices. Uh, Either you stick to whatever branch of Christianity you were brought up in, um, or, as you say, Buddhism had a certain kind of respectability. There were some quite well-known converts to Buddhism. There was a man called Christmas Humphreys, who was a British judge who had converted to Buddhism and written books about Buddhism.
Hmm.
Um, so, but I hadn't heard of theosophy or anthroposophy or any of these other things, let alone Wicca. And there were very few esoteric bookshops at that time. Well, there was Watkins Bookshop in London, the Atlantis, but I didn't know about those. Growing up in Edinburgh, there was no esoteric bookshop in Edinburgh. There were
Hmm.
no New Age magazines, so there was just no way for me to find out about these things. Um, so, well, Buddhism was basically the only option. So, as a teenager at school, I decided to start a Buddhist society, and I got together with a couple of friends of mine. But really, we were completely clueless about what Buddhism was, and we just, and my schoolmates, they thought I was mad. You know, the idea of somebody starting a Buddhist society was just crazy. And, and anyway, it only lasted for one meeting. That was the end. That was the end of that attempt.
At least you gave it a go. And it's funny, while I was reading the book, it occurred to me, it seems like kind of a repeating pattern in your life. You seem, to my observation, to naturally join or start organizations. Like
Mm,
when new interests would arise, you would either join an organization or you would make one. Like that happened multiple times through your life, which obviously indicates that you're just maybe kind of a leader by temperament. But what do you think the drive for was that? Like even with the writing group, like you mentioned earlier,
mm.
you started an actual club and you reached out to get more members. Like what do you think drives that in you?
Well, I think it's It's not quite as not quite as strong a drive as you think.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I have started a few things. I have started a few things in my life. I started that society, that literary society at Oxford, which is still going actually.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because we revived it. It was started in 1963, and in so we had our centenary and our 50th anniversary. And when the 50th anniversary came up, we revived it.
Hmm.
We thought we should celebrate the 50th anniversary in some way. So we got together in London and had a meeting. And it was such fun that we decided to continue it. So we're still meeting every year.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So that was one society that I started. Um, and oh yeah, well, since I moved to Germany, I've started a number of initiatives. Like I started a folk dance group
Hmm.
because to me, part of being a pagan is celebrating one's local traditions, and that includes folk dance, folk song, folk mythology, and all of that, customs. And I'm very fond of the British Morris dancing tradition, which actually has pagan roots because many of the dances involve in a kind of seasonal rituals.
Hmm.
So I started this Morris dancing group in Bremen, which was going for a while. Um, then it rather fell apart. It was difficult. It was difficult to sustain a core group of committed people.
Hmm.
So that rather fell apart. Um, then I made an attempt to. I felt that at a certain point I felt that one of the things that was lacking for pagans was some form of um, what in Christianity is called care care of the soul. That is for people with emotional and psychological problems to have people that they can go to for advice and counseling.
Hmm.
And I felt that this was that there was a need for such help from the pagan perspective. And so we got together with some other people, and we spent quite a long time discussing exactly what form this initiative would take, and how, uh, how many sessions we would allow for each person, and what the legal implications would be, and so on. It turned out to be quite a complicated thing to organize. And then finally, we were ready to set it in motion. Waited for the clients, as it were, to come, and only one came, and then no more. So we decided the time wasn't right for this. So those are a few of the initiatives. Some of them have lasted, some haven't.
You bring up a story in the book where you talk about you had a really harsh schoolmaster, and you
Yeah,
most of your book you openly discuss who these people are, but you don't mention his name because you're trying to you don't want to stir up drama or whatever. But I thought it was a really good story, and I wanted to go into it a little bit. And the reason why I thought it was a good story is because so many people they have these traumatic encounters in life,
yeah,
and you kind of make sense of it. You're able to look back at it with the perspective and see the role that it played in your own development. And to me, as an outside observer, I almost think it was like a necessary part of your development, as painful as it was at the time. Um,
Yeah,
like your growth as this person who is going to influence so many people with your scholarship and everything. So I was wondering if we could just go into that story a little bit, this schoolmaster and how it really kind of changed your psychic life for to some extent.
yeah, yeah. Um, well, what what can I say? It was I was completely unprepared for it. That's one of the things that strikes me about it, because if somebody had said to me, "Well, this is a kind of test. This is a kind of ordeal, a test that you're going to go through, and if you can get through it, um, and if you can remain resilient throughout and come out of it resilient, then that will. It's like it's like what Friedrich Nietzsche says. What doesn't kill me is good for me. Well, if I'd looked at it in that light, then it might have had a positive effect. But in fact, it just turned me completely in upon myself. I became very, very withdrawn and socially very reserved and uncommunicative. And also, I think it screwed up my moral values
Hmm.
because if you're punished for something, if you don't know the reason why you were punished, and it seems that you were punished for no reason at all, then you think, well, if I'm going to be punished anyway, I might as well just do what I like. Um, so it sort of damaged my moral sense. So um, later on, um, I came to realize the importance of having moral values. So I had to. That was something that I had to develop. Uh,
Interesting.
so in that in that sense, maybe it had some positive effect. Um, because the path that I'm on does have certain values. It's contained in the Edda, in
Hmm.
the poems about the Edda, like the Havamal, which is the sayings of the High One, the sayings of Odin, which contains some very good advice about how to live a good life, how
Hmm.
to how to preserve the reputation you're going to leave behind, and so on. Um, so if I have one regret, it's that I didn't come into contact with paganism earlier.
Hmm. And why is that? How do you think your life might have been different?
I think I would have. Um, I think I would have been. I would have developed a more open kind of personality, and I would have been more. If I discovered that path earlier, it would have given me a kind of confidence,
Hmm.
which I think I later developed to some extent.
Hmm. So for those people who um, are spiritual explorers, which is basically anybody watching this
Mm.
channel, what would you say are the like what did paganism do for you? And for the viewers, for the listeners, if you read Chris's excellent book, um, he delved into all kinds of traditions, both obvious spiritual ones and like more outsider
Mm,
traditions,
mm.
before finally settling on paganism. I think it was in like your mid 40s is when you settled on paganism, if I remember correctly. How? what is it about paganism that you get that the other ones didn't give you? What connects with you so much that you were like, this is my path?
Uh, well, as I as I say in the book, to me, a religion should satisfy satisfy the human being on five different levels. So there's the soul, the brain, the heart, the belly. By the belly, I mean the visceral, passionate Dionysian side of ourselves. And then there's the fifth level, which is the feet,
Hmm.
where you say, what, the feet? Well, by the feet, I mean the ground on which we stand. That is the place that we belong to, either because we grew up there or because we put down roots there.
Hmm.
The place where we put down roots and everything that goes with it. The culture, the language, the traditions, the, the folklore, the music, the language, and the nature, the wildlife, the plant life, and everything, the geography. So all of that, and so if you look at if you compare religions, well, Christianity has a lot for the heart. It has a lot for the soul. It doesn't have so much for the brain, and it has practically nothing for the belly.
Hmm.
Um, so um, the pagan path has something for all those levels. You see what I mean?
Right. Hmm. Yeah, that's yeah, I love that. And that's something I really enjoy in the book is when you, as
Mm,
somebody who has spent so much time thinking about these things and
mm,
helping us make sense of to me that's I think one of the most valuable things about your book is that
mm.
you have spanned different cultures, you've traveled everywhere, but both
Yeah.
also just the time, and
Mm,
you've been a sincere explorer of multiple uh, religions. And on
mm,
top of that, you're just a really smart guy, which I know you probably don't want to say, but you are. I mean, you've made your whole life
mm,
writing books. Not many people can do that. So you are clearly, objectively a very intelligent person who can synthesize all of this information. And so I find it very useful for people who are also trying to find their own way. And
mm,
including like I think like really young people who are just starting on their journey. I think this book would be so useful for people because
mm.
you have so many twists and snaky turns in your life, but you know what? You wound
Yeah.
up where you were supposed to be. And I just
Mm,
think it's a really neat story. It's really fascinating. But
mm,
what would you say to these? Actually, there's someplace else I want to go right now. So your challenges when you were young were that
mm,
there were very limited access to
mm.
alternative spiritual ideas, but
Yeah.
nowadays it's everywhere. People can access this information anytime, any place. What do you think are the challenges for people today, or are there none? I mean, what do you think about the landscape today and how it's different for young seekers?
Mm. Well, paganism is growing everywhere. Its numbers are increasing. Um, especially, there's been an enormous growth in Eastern Europe
Hmm.
since the since the collapse of communism and the Soviet Union. In those countries in the Baltic states, um, and in Ukraine and in Russia itself, um, there's been a big return to the pre-Christian gods. Um, and in Western Europe as well, it's growing rapidly. In Iceland, it's particularly strong.
Hmm.
Um, so there's plenty of. It's very easy to find contacts for anyone who's seeking seeking that path today.
Hmm.
It's it's very easy to find contacts um, and groups to join. There's the group one group that I belong to is the Pagan Federation, which was started I think back in the 60s or 70s in England, and has now spread to many other countries. And it's a very good organization because it embraces many different forms of paganism,
Hmm.
and they have meetings and conferences. They publish a magazine, so that would be a good step for anyone who's uh, thinking about going on this particular path,
Hmm.
to join the Pagan Federation. Um, and nowadays there's a huge amount of literature available, and of course there's the internet.
Hmm.
So in contrast to when I was growing up, there's an abundance of information that's readily available.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I assume you must. I'm hoping this doesn't put you on the spot a little bit, but do you feel like a sense of like ownership? I mean, you helped. You've your works, your books, your the time that you spent with these organizations. I mean, you've kind of helped us bridge into this area where we are now, where paganism is becoming more common. I mean, does
Hmm.
it feel that way to you? Do you feel like a sense of ownership and having help resurrect these traditions?
Well, I wouldn't say ownership, no,
Or
but
maybe participation. Maybe participation is a better word for it.
well, if I've inspired a few people to to go on that path, then I'm very happy.
Hmm.
But I mean, it was already it was already in existence long before I became involved.
Hmm.
There were some very heroic uh, people that I knew actually back in the 70s and 80s, who were instrumental in the founding of the Pagan Federation, and also um, spreading awareness in Britain, because there was a lot of prejudice. There was a lot of prejudice at that time, and at one point there was a huge scare about satanic abuse and that sort of thing.
Oh, that was that time. I didn't even make that connection. Yeah, that was the
Yeah,
time period, right?
yeah, and so terrible things happened. Um, Children were taken away from their parents and put into care, and terrible things going on because there was a complete misunderstanding about what paganism was, and the Pagan Federation played a very key role in um, carrying out a campaign to make people aware of what it really was,
Hmm.
and make it more acceptable.
Hmm.
And if you look at the situation today, uh, it's a dramatic change because it's now possible on when a census is carried out under the heading religion, you can now enter pagan as your religion.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there are pagan prison visitors, pagan hospital visitors. Um, you can have a pagan wedding, a pagan funeral. Um, there's even a pagan association inside the police force. So
Hmm.
it's become very established now in Britain. Less so in other countries, um, but that will change over time.
Hmm. It's interesting thing that you mentioned in your book is from a very like young, well, younger age or
Mm,
younger time in your life,
mm,
you started to seem to have this weird like butting of heads with I guess what could generically be called globalism or like one world government. It seemed to be something like you mentioned in the book. It's kind of this like hobgoblin that popped up at various times in your life.
mm.
And
Yeah,
could you just discuss that a little bit and just your history with it and your thoughts on it? Because I think that your thoughts on it are very worthwhile and worth
yeah.
hearing.
Well, I worked for many years for the United Nations, which is a global organization. Um, so I'm not against a global vision. I'm not against a global vision of human rights, of human justice, of pros global prosperity and so on. Because that's all. Those are all ideals that the United Nations has promoted. But what I am against, what I don't like, is a global monoculture where the, the idea is to turn the whole world into the model of a supermarket in a suburb
Hmm.
where you hear the same piped in music, you see the same architecture, same sort of monotonous architecture. Um, so there's a cinema which is showing the same kind of movies, um, and everything is kind of ironed out into this global monoculture. Um, so that's really what I'm against.
Hmm.
And also, I don't like the idea of a world government. I think the, the nation state is the best guarantor against a world tyranny. So I believe that nations should celebrate their own culture, their own traditions. I have I have a novel that I wrote called The Lebensborn Spy, which is a sort of a spy thriller, but it
I
does.
own it. I own it.
You
Sorry,
own
go
it, do you?
ahead.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, in that story, there's a young guy who's actually of Danish origin, and he's living in East Berlin um, when it was communist, and he has an ardently communist wife, and one day he says to her that he has a longing to make contact with his Danish roots, and she hits the roof and says, "Oh, you know all that stuff about roots, and that's just bourgeois nonsense. You know, one day there'll be no more little silly little countries like Denmark, and there'll be no borders, and we'll all be speaking the same language." And he says, "Well, that's not a world I would like to live in." So that's more or less my own sentiment.
A total agreement. It seems boring to me. Like, why would I not want to celebrate people being different, have different cultures and everything? But
Yeah.
so as you're looking back, and again, I hope this doesn't put you on the spot. No, it should. It should. We should be okay here. I'm
Mm,
curious. When you look back, as you're writing your book, you're looking back over your life. You've been very productive.
mm.
What do you think were like your highlight contributions? Whether they were books or organizations. I'm really thinking about books. Like, what do you think are your best books? The books that you really want to stand for your legacy.
Oh, that's a difficult question. Well, I think I have to make a distinction between my scholarly books and the other books. Well, I've written, shall we say, three categories of books. There's my scholarly writings. There, I would say probably my books on the Rosicrucians,
Hmm.
especially the book from my doctoral thesis, which I think is, that's established a certain reputation in the world of scholarship. Um, then my book, my esoteric writings, um, or yeah, shall we say my fiction? There's a novel I wrote called, well, you know, The Lebensborn Spy. There's one I wrote called The Return of the Tetrad, which is a kind of, it's a novel about a spiritual quest. It's still available. Still available, actually. If you go into Amazon, you'll find it still available. And it's sort of it has some autobiographical aspects, because it's a story about a young guy who comes into contact with an older man who was had been a member of a magical order, and this older man becomes a sort of guru to him and leads him on a kind of esoteric quest involving a search for 4 different objects that correspond to the suits of the tarot: the sword, the cup, the wand, and the pentacle. And the idea is that in the course of the story, these objects are brought together. So I think that's a book that I'm fairly proud of.
Hmm.
Um, I think it inspired a few people.
Hmm. Excellent. That's yeah, that's actually also on my purchase list.
Oh yeah.
So that was actually the one I meant to because you had we had talked about this previously and I got them mixed up. That's why I bought the Lesbian Bar and Spy. I
Mm,
should have gotten the Ted. I'm glad I got the Spy. But my point is the Return of the Tetrad was the one that you
yeah.
had mentioned. I misremembered
Mm,
it, but it's okay.
mm,
It gives me another book to read, so it's all
yeah.
good.
Mm,
So we're looking back, right? We've been talking about your book. Makes sense. The book is your autobiography. It's about your life up to this point. But as we're
mm.
coming to the end of this hour, what have you got in the what have you got in the oven for the future? You got any more books that are in process or any projects?
Yeah. I'm at the moment. I'm writing a book on Prague.
Oh wow.
Because, having written Occult Russia and Occult Germany, I'm now writing Occult Prague, because Prague is a place that I have a strong connection with. I've been there many times, and it's a remarkable place with a remarkable history, very rich in esoteric traditions, and the whole culture is very much steeped in the esoteric. So um, that's what I'm writing at the moment.
Hmm. Excellent. Definitely be looking forward to that one. And that's no, actually, let me say that as well. The amazing thing in your book, I'm saying this for the benefit of the viewers or listeners, you you just like travel to all of the like the important locations for this occult esoteric spiritual
Mm,
culture like your life you're just bouncing around, you get like New York and Los Angeles, like all these places that were at the
mm,
time big esoteric locations, and you were there, which is really cool. But so this last question, I know this is a big question, but I've got to
mm,
ask it. You've
mm,
spent your whole life immersed in this study, um,
mm,
taking it very seriously and thinking very much about it. Now you've come to your pagan roots, but you've got your own mind.
mm,
What do you think is the purpose of this life? Like, and I know that's a big question, but like really, I'm actually asking it sincerely.
mm,
What do you think is the purpose of this? Why are we here? And how should we best live our lives?
mm. Yeah, it is. It is a big question, as you say. Um, I'll have to I have to take a moment to think about that.
I kind of suspected that. I really don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm sincerely dying to know, and I know other people have to know. I mean, when somebody who has a brain like yours spends a career focused on this quest, I
Mm,
just really would love to know what you think it's about now. I mean, obviously, if you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to go there, but I would love to hear it if you do have
mm.
thoughts.
Well, okay. Well, we're we're all born with certain gifts and abilities, and I think that the task is to make the best we can of those gifts and abilities that we've been given. Um, now, in my own case, I'm trying in my own modest way to do that. I think one of the important things is to have the sense that you're leaving something. You're leaving something in the world. Um, something you're leaving something good behind in
Hmm.
the world. Um, so in my own case, um, there's a quotation from Dostoevsky, where one of Dostoevsky's characters says that um, the world is going to be saved by beauty. So I'm trying to leave behind a little bit of beauty.
Hmm.
Um, uh, one of the things, apart from my books, one of the things very that I'm engaged in is gardening. And in fact, one of my books is called Gardens of the Gods, and it's about sacred and symbolic gardens in different traditions and different parts of the world. And I'm trying here in Lower Saxony in North Germany, where I live. Um, my wife and I are creating a small garden of the gods of our own, which is filled with objects, statuary, stones with inscriptions on them, um, and so on. Uh, I call it a garden of the mysteries.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
Yeah, it's by the mysteries I mean um, basically three kinds of mystery: the classical mysteries of ancient Greece and Rome, and the Celtic and Nordic mysteries of the North, and the Hermetic mysteries. So parts of the garden are dedicated to these different mysteries.
Hmm.
Um, so that that's something that I think that I can leave behind and feel that I've created something beautiful.
Hmm.
And also, there are my books, which seem to have inspired a few people. So I think the speaking, I've tried as best I can to use the gifts that I've been given, and that's really all that I can do.
Hmm. Well, I mean, it seems that you have gone further in that than most people who have chosen that
Mm.
venture. So I don't know. It seems successful to me. But yeah, man. So do you have anything else that you would like to share with anybody, either about your most recent book, your upcoming book now, Occult Prague, or just life in general? Anything else you'd like to say?
Life in general. Well, um, I've I've been blessed. I've been blessed with a wonderful family, and that's another thing to be very grateful for, um, because you know it's fine to write books and all of that, but human relations are just as important.
It's yeah, and with the relations, I have to share with people. I think it's fascinating that you and Joscelyn Godwin have been friends for so long, and I say that because you're two of the bigger names in this space, and it's really neat to me to think of the two of you being buddies through all these years and through
Yes, yes.
this whole journey. You know, you both contributed so much, so
Mm,
it's just really neat. But anyway, so thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for the book. I love
mm,
as I said this to Gary Lockman as well. A lot of the people I think who contribute to these kind of spiritual spaces, you're humble by nature, and
mm,
like humility is a virtue and everything. And I understand that, but I really think it's valuable to people to be able to look
mm,
back on your life and on the lives of the people who contribute because it kind of
mm,
informs ours and there's lessons to learn from it.
yeah.
So
Mm.
I loved seeing the book. I loved reading the book. I'm so glad to hear it's out there, and I also so appreciate your time once again. It's
Well,
always an honor. It's always an honor to have you on. And I really appreciate it very much.
it's a great pleasure. Uh, always, I always enjoy talking to you.
Oh, thank you very much.